Today's episode is brought to you by Positively Productive Systems, whose mission is to be the antidote to your stress and to provide compassionate productivity resources and coaching that help you heal and achieve. Be sure to check out both free and paid resources at positivelyproductive.com/resources.
People naturally think burnout equals mental health. That's not necessarily true. If you're listening right now and I say on a scale of 1 to 10, where 0, you're not burnt out, and 10, you are, the closer you are to a 10 simply means you're not aligned. And the further you stay being unaligned, not just in business, but life and community, you are compromising your health, both physical and mental health, your spiritual wealth, and the list goes on. So it's about where do you need to realign in order for the goodness to come.
You're listening to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zaratny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a coach certified in time and stress management, helping overwhelmed clients make space for what matters. Join me each episode as we explore ways to live a more proactive, productive life with topics and guests that speak to simplifying self-awareness, systems, and so much more. I understand overwhelm personally as a fellow multi-passionate entrepreneur, wife and mom to kids and cats, and former caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Welcome to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and I'm excited about today's topic because my guest brings a truly holistic, caring, trauma-informed perspective to business strategy. Being successful goes far deeper than we realize, and today we'll talk about what we need to understand, to do, and to be in order to grow our businesses and as humans. Today I welcome Angela Henderson back to the podcast. She joined us in episode 82 to discuss the planning mindset you need to create your best year. Angela's an international award-winning business coach for women, international keynote speaker, and podcaster who helps women in business make more money by creating tailored business strategies and mastering their mindset so they can hit 6 to 7 figures. Today, we take the mindset discussion much further as she shares 5 reasons why she sees her clients struggle to grow their businesses. We discuss how we must understand why we're doing what we're doing, use a proper business model for what we do, see our burnout as an indication of lack of alignment, take responsibility for our growth and change, and prioritize the proper use of our time. Ange digs deep into each of these and gives examples, along with some information on limiting beliefs most often seen in her high-achieving clients. She also shares encouragement for moving forward and gives us the 3 next steps we need to take to turn things around. Before we get into our conversation, I want to mention 2 things. One is the book she recommends, The Go-Giver, is the same one she mentioned in her prior episode, and you can find a link to that and any of the books we mention on the podcast on the favorites page of the Positively Productive website, positivelyproductive.com/favorites. And 2, there's so much to unpack in this episode, and Ange does an awesome job of offering next steps. But you might find yourself wanting to process it a bit to figure out your specific next best steps. May I invite you to book a productivity boost session? It's the perfect way to try out coaching, see what it's like, get clear on your next best steps, and get a boost of productivity to encourage and inspire. It only takes 30 minutes. You can go to positivelyproductive.com/boost, BOOST. And be sure to use the promo code PODCAST for a very special listener discount. Now let's join Ange to talk about the 5 reasons why you're struggling to grow your business. Welcome to the Positively Living Podcast, Angela Henderson, or should I say welcome back?
Yes, yay. Always so excited to be with you. I was so excited when I look at my calendar. It's one of the things I always like, what am I looking forward to in the week? Because when I look into my calendar, if there's things that I'm not looking forward to, it's a sign that I must start changing and realigning because it will lead to burnout. And so when I look at my calendar, I'm always trying to smile. And I definitely smiled this morning knowing that I was going to get reconnected with you. So it's a pleasure to be here.
And if it's any wonder why I wanted you on, because you answered a question already regarding our topic, then wonder no more. But before we really dig in, I'd love it if you please tell us a bit about who you are and who you help and what makes you light up.
I mean, listen, I always start off with it is that I'm a proud Canadian. Don't get me mixed up with the Americans, right? Because people say this all the time. Whoa, what part of America are you from? I'm like, whoa, I'm still Canadian. But I did live a third of my life in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then in North Carolina. And now I live in Australia. So I actually have this really unusual accent. And it's like a third Canadian, a third Yankee, do you know what I mean? And a third Australian. So, it's like this combination. But I also love the color pink. I love adding a splash of glitter to it. And I also equally love eating Nutella straight from the jar. So those are a little bit of fun facts about me. I'm also a proud mom to two delightful kids, Finley John, who is now 13, and Chloe Glenella, who is 10. They're part of my why, but I think it's important that I emphasize they're not all of my why. I believe for so many of us, motherhood, we start to get lost and we start to lose ourselves. And so as much as they're part of my why, I've allowed myself to still be an amazing woman in business, but equally an amazing mother, and that I've learned that I can have both of those things. But what do? I ultimately help women around the world make more money. But I do that in a way that is really acknowledging and creating a plan, a personalized strategy for them as individuals, because people's home life is very different. People's business models are very different. People's communities are very different. People's trauma and upbringing are very different. And so the reason why I believe I get the success that I do with clients is that we're really honing in on an individual personalized strategy. It can't be cookie cutter. I do that through my one-on-one programs, my masterminds. I've got a podcast. I do keynote speaking. I've got a retreat in Bali this year. So yeah, that's a little bit about what I do and what I love.
Right. And I'm a fan. I have been involved in many of your groups and masterminds. I've also been honored to be a productivity coach to members of your mastermind, but I've also learned so much from you. And in our interactions and being on your podcast, you being on mine, I have seen in every single instance where you're helping your clients move forward, you're also honoring where they are. And it's just like you said, that personalized strategy. It's what I believe in too when it comes to productivity, because one size cannot fit all.
100%. And yet that's what we're consuming almost every day in our news feed. Create a 6-figure business with this secret sauce. Create a 7-figure business doing this. And yes, it might work to some degree, but most people don't understand that they're just going to think if they sign up for this course and do exactly what that person says, it will equal success, when that's very far from the truth. The course will add elements or ingredients to the recipe, but it's still up to you to find the right recipe that works for you, your family, your home life, and your community.
Exactly. And also, even if you happen across something that works for you, it can sometimes only work for a bit, because then what happens, like you said, we have different trauma and grief in our lives. We have different experiences that are going to affect our ability to step up and do the thing, and finding our own unique way to do that in a sustainable way is so critical.
I think it's a sustainable way, but I also think too that what happens is as we test things and as we use things, we also start to evolve as people, as women in business. And what happens is something may have worked for where we were at that time in that place, but then you grow and you evolve and it no longer serves you. So being okay with pivoting, being okay with letting go, and being okay with surrendering is really, really important in my opinion, because so often we want to hang on to what we know and we're scared of what we don't know.
Yeah, that is so true. And that is another good tip right there. So I want to back up just slightly to say, what kinds of patterns have you seen in working with so many women where they want to be ambitious, they're pushing forward, they are high achievers, there's no doubt about that. And what have you seen in terms of pushing themselves too far and then coming back from it, and like those patterns?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things there. I'd say one is that women are not doing what they want to do, for starters. Women are following, most of the times when they come into my space, someone else's dream. And so the very first thing that I encourage people to do is really think about, like, why are you doing what you're doing? What will more money ultimately allow you to have in your life that it currently doesn't? Because that's what you want. It actually isn't more money. So even though I help women make more money, the reality of it is when you start working with me, that's when we get underneath. And so that's my first thing, is what would that money allow you to have? And typically what I see is they want to be able to contribute to their family unit. They want to feel seen. They want to have time freedom to be able to go and create memories with their families. They want to be able to go on holidays because they haven't been able to. They want to find themselves again. They want to get their confidence again. That's what more money will allow them to have, right? And obviously that financial freedom, etc. The second thing that I see is, in addition to people not knowing their dreams, people's business models are flawed because, again, they're doing what they believe that they should be doing because someone told them to create a course or someone told them to create a membership or someone told them to stop doing one-on-one. And so, again, going back to what brings you joy in the first point and why you're doing what you're doing, and then understanding too, maybe your business model is no longer serving you, and really looking at it. And you might have to let go of programs. You might have to start from scratch. But once you do that, things will start to magically ease and flow. And the last thing that I would say is I see a lot of women talk about burnout. I'm burnt out, I'm burnt out, I'm burnt out. Well, it actually starts with stress, which then leads to burnout, which then leads to full-blown mental health diagnosis. And people naturally think burnout equals mental health. That's not necessarily true. If you're listening right now and I say on a scale of 1 to 10, where 0, you're not burnt out, and 10, you are, the closer you are to a 10 simply means you're not aligned. And the further you stay being unaligned, not just in business, but life and community, you are compromising your health, both physical and mental health, your spiritual wealth, and the list goes on. So it's about, where do you need to realign in order for the goodness to come? And again, people only just a lot of times in business think it's just the revenue wealth that they've got to realign with. No. So I'll give you an example. Christmas Day 2021, my husband had pissed me off for the final time and I asked him for a divorce. Now, you might think it's a bit douchery that I did it on Christmas Day, but I remember going into the bathroom, looking in the mirror and crying. And I said, I'm not doing this another year. I'm not. We're 6 days out before the new year. This is not happening again. I'm going into the new year knowing that another Christmas will never end up like this. I realigned, so I'd already started the realigning process with myself around my home life, right? That one component. He then left on March 14th. March 30th was my biggest revenue month in my business. It's no coincidence that when you allow yourself to do hard things and understand where you're unaligned, that the rest of your world will start to realign. But often it is so scary. But I believe that women radically need to start taking responsibility for their life. And that's the other thing that I see. Women, and I'm only saying women because that's who I work with. I'm not saying that men don't do this too, but more often in my experience than women, even when I used to work more with men too, is that there's always, oh, my husband isn't doing this. My parents aren't doing this. My clients aren't doing this. Well, what are you doing? Where are you taking responsibility? Are you asking your husband to help you? Are you asking your family members to take the kids for the weekend? Are you just sitting there assuming that they're going to come in? Nobody's coming to save you. The only person that can save themselves is you. So if you're unaligned in part of your world right now, that's on you to find a solution, not anyone else. So those are kind of the things that I've seen in my experience.
Yeah, and you've answered so many of the future questions that I had, which is, I see this pendulum swing, at least in terms of the discussions. We have all of this push. I see so many similar things that you do with, whose calendar are you running here? What are you trying to do? Where did this come from? You're making important decisions that should come internally, and you're taking them from someplace outside of you. So that's already going to be misaligned. There's going to be this huge dissonance because you're going to be trying to do the things and resenting it and struggling, right? So first there's that. Then there is the push toward burnout. And I appreciate you outlining where we are heading toward that and what that can look like. And then there's this talk of, okay, well, we have to simplify and bring everything back. And I am, me, I live for simplification. It's a huge tenet of what I teach and what I coach, but it's not always about just cut it all out. What you're saying is it's about doing the right things. It's about aligning.
It's about aligning, but I also think it's about understanding what levers are levers that you can push and pull. So a lot of times women, and I know you would see this too, they come to me and they're like, oh, I've got my to-do list and 8 hours goes by and I'm done. They're being busy. They're not necessarily being productive, right? So yes, they're ticking boxes, but I also think technology plays a huge role in this. If you go and got your phone right now, it's going to tell you exactly your average per day. And in my experience, most women on their phones for an average of about 6 to 7 hours per day, literally. And you might think, what? That's a third of my waking hours. But if you genuinely think about how many times this phone is getting picked up every single hour, those hours accumulate over time. So that's the other thing is I see women not prioritizing their time in a way that's allowing them to stay in alignment, but at the same time allowing them to get a return on investment for things that they're doing. So yes, they're being busy, but they're not being productive. And they're not being productive doing, in my opinion, revenue generating activities. They're off scrolling. They're off doing more in Canva because they think that that's what they need to do. But they're not asking for the sale, right? Because that's fear. Fear then comes into place. This isn't safe for me to ask for the sale. So then they continue to flutter around and wonder why we're not having a successful business. So it's this balance. And I know you and I both actually hate the word balance because I believe balance is bullshit and it actually sets people up. But in this instance, I think balance is the right word, and that you've got to find out what your push and pull is for you. You've got to find out what push and pull means for your family, what push and pull means for your business, and what push and pull means for your life and your community outside of business and family. And only you can figure that out. That's going to look different for everyone. But until you do, I believe you're going to get stuck in a loop, in a negative loop cycle. And so that's what is going to lead to the unalignment part again. And then we start with shame, and then the cycle continues.
With that push and pull and your point about balance, so it is a semantic thing. When you're talking about balance in that way, that really is. It's the balance of, if you will, the percentages, or like you said, the levers, how are you going to leverage certain things, or where are you spending more of your time based upon your values or based upon what you need to prioritize, such as, in the case of what you described, revenue generating activities. It's like, okay, you have this much time to work with. You're ambitious. You want to push forward. You want to achieve. Be clear on what you want to achieve, and then be clear on what does it take. That's something that you teach beautifully, so that you can be truly efficient with this time. And what I'm hearing you say, or at least this is the lens through which I see it, is busy is really that culprit that leads you to burnout.
100%, because it's like, again, we just keep in that loop. If you go back to my point one, until you know why you're in business and what you actually want, you will continue to create a calendar filled with things that don't bring you joy. You'll continue to whinge about what's going on between you and your husband. You won't find joy in the moments with your kids and your family members because everything feels heavy. But again, the only person who's going to get you out of this loop is you. And typically what happens is I can give you a simple strategy, do this or do this. But the reality of it is whatever is going on is rooted in you, and it's being driven by your subconscious. And your subconscious, there's three primary things for those people up to kind of the $500,000 mark. It's I don't belong, I don't feel safe, and I don't feel like I'm enough. When you get over the $500,000 mark and on your way to $1 million per year, typically you'll see another subconscious belief that comes into play, which is loneliness. And so if you're really wanting to make change, in my experience, after being a mental health clinician where I used to diagnose people with schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, anxiety for 15 years, and doing CBT and DBT therapy, that could work, but that's a lot of talking. And in my experience, I believe universities, from the psychologists and us social workers, are doing a detriment to individuals because they think talking therapy is the only way. I disagree. Talking therapy might work for some people if that's an alignment for them, but it doesn't work for all people, especially if they've had problems using their voice or speaking for whatever the trauma has been. The second thing is there is some mindset work like NLP that you can do. But in my opinion, the thing that made the biggest change for me was going and hiring a hypnotherapist and doing the work, because what you can get to the root of the problem within 45 minutes versus say 12 to 15, 20 sessions in talking therapy, you get to the root of it. An example that I'll give is I was struggling with making more money and I couldn't understand, like I just had this money block and I couldn't figure out what the block was. In my hypnotherapy session, it's really easy. It's all done by a phone. So my room's dark, the phone's on my chest, they're counting me down. It's all done virtually. They then like, okay, when we get to 0, you'll be where you need to be. And I was at 0 and there was like these walls and it was like, I was having problems with receiving money, something else. And then all of a sudden, like these speech bubbles came out and it just said lonely, lonely, lonely. They're like, that's why you're not making the money. That's where your money block comes. Where does this loneliness come from? And then they ask you some additional questions. And the loneliness for me came from, My mom was a nurse, then she was a nurse practitioner. So the next highest she could be was a doctor. Then she did she got into drugs, and now she lost everything. So my subconscious was telling me that it wasn't safe to make more money, because if you make more money, you're going to end up like your mother, who is lonely. So therefore, stop making more money. Now, once I had insight to this, I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. But there's no amount of talking therapy that would have gotten me to that root problem. I genuinely believe that wouldn't have got. So I think that's the other thing in society is there's a lot of tips and tricks that people are giving people, but it's actually the root that you need to get to. And so these tips or tricks that people are giving will get people ahead of the game for a little while, but the subconscious brains makes up 97% of our decisions before we do logically. And so they've already made the decision before it comes out of our mind. And so the thing is if you're generally wanting to do it, like just go and get the hypnotherapist and get to the root of what's going on. You can keep listening to more podcasts, you can keep doing whatever, but that's why inside of my programs now there is a mindset coach. We've got our healer. We also have our hypnotherapy that they can go to. They also have me to do their strategy. And it's like an all-you-can-eat buffet. They've got to pick and choose what they need right now to realign. Hypnotherapy isn't for everyone right now, right? But sometimes I have to plant the seed, and it takes them 4 or 5 months before they're like, okay, I'm ready to book the session now. So that's what I'm saying, Lisa, is like, there's so much that we can do to realign, but until we actually get to the root that is causing us to not realign, we will continue to self-sabotage and we will continue to remain stagnant. So what you have to be mindful is when you take radical responsibility for your life and choose to start making change and choose to start getting to the root of where these problems are in your subconscious, you will also need to understand you are going to go through a grieving process. And that grieving process is the loss of friends, the loss of family, and even the loss of your old self. It can become lonely for a short amount of time, but when you get through that grief, you're unstoppable. It's easier to know when you're unaligned. It's easier for you to understand what toxic people are, to let them go and invite the new people. And so there's this really beautiful change cycle that happens, but you've got to be willing to take radical responsibility and to go and do the work.
Yeah, and this is what we need to hear. And this is all tied into this idea of you want to be ambitious, you want to do well, you want to succeed, you don't want to burn out. Well, if you're spinning your wheels, trying to do what everyone else is telling you to do, you're not getting to the root of who you are, to your values, to your problems, to your blocks, to your limiting beliefs, to all the things that are happening. If you're not dealing with those directly and addressing those, that's why we talk about trauma and grief on this podcast so much. Not because, yay, that's a happy topic. Thank you, Lisa. But because we need to go through those things. We need to embrace them and say, okay, what are they doing in my life here? And what am I doing in my life here? But to your point, working through all that, the only one who will know is you. And such an important point. There's grief there, even when you want it. Even when you've chosen it, you will still grieve. And yes, you will also grieve the people that may fall by the wayside because they can only see what you're doing through their own limited lens.
Probably about 8 weeks ago at time of recording, I started dating this new guy named Grant. And I remember we went for the first get together, and it was just a walk in the park. And I remember getting in my car and I was like, oh, I don't know if there's going to be another date here. And I couldn't figure it out. I was like, was he good looking? Yes. Was he super kind and generous? Yes. And all these things, I was like, well, then what is the problem? And I was like, because he was so calm and so not what I was used to with chaos, right? Mm-hmm. My body wasn't coping that there was a level of a new baseline shifting. If I wouldn't have done the inner work, I would have sent the text message saying, thanks, it was lovely to meet you, but this isn't going to work because I'm used to chaos and toxicity. And when I say toxicity, Dale, my ex, and Al, they were both good guys. But what I'm saying is they still had these elements of passive aggressiveness, do you know what I mean, et cetera, that I had accepted. Mm-hmm. So for me, though, I was like, so if I wouldn't have done the inner work and knew that what I was actually doing here was having to create and sit in my nervous system with a new baseline of what I've actually wanted for my whole entire life, I would have thrown that relationship, that opportunity away. But I had the insight to sit with that and go, what is the real problem here? The real problem was I had found exactly what I wanted, but I didn't know how to sit in calm.
Yeah, you wouldn't have been able to see the value and you wouldn't have been able to accept that belongs to you.
100%. Because again, my nervous system is around chaos or walking on eggshells from a relationship perspective. So what I'm saying is like, it's that inner work that now, again, we've been together for longer and he's just this amazing human, but I could have thrown it all away. Mm-hmm. So again, until you do that inner work, you'll start to see things slip up. Even with my kids, for example, I'll give you another example. So Chloe, my daughter, I love Nike shoes. They just seem to last longer than any other shoes. She likes, they're called Asics, I think, here in Australia. Yep, maybe in America too. And we were out, and I just remember the rules in my house was, if I'm paying the bills, you wear what I buy for you to wear, pretty much, right? And so the other day, I was like, what Nike shoe do you want? And I could see she's humming and hawing. And then I was like, okay, what shoe do you like? And then she's like, this one. And I was like, all right, get it. And later on, I had to go to her and I had to say, listen, I want to take responsibility for the way mom treated you today. And she's only 10. And I was like, because when mom grew up, this was the rules and this is how it was have to be. So mom was having a hard time with like letting go of you making your own choice. So even though I'm not perfect, mom wants you to know that I take responsibility if I made you feel bad for choosing the shoes that you liked. Now that might seem minor, but it's these things that are called the T1 and T2 trauma. T1 trauma is like the big trauma, but it's these T2 traumas that we infuse onto our children that end up with them having their own trauma later on. But again, if I hadn't taken the time to do the inner work, I would have continued on with a cycle that has gone on from generation to generation. And my grandmother stopped speaking to her mother. My mother stopped speaking to my grandmother, and I don't speak to my mother. If I didn't do the inner work, I'm compromising my relationship with my daughter and future generations of women by not choosing to do the inner work. It might seem simple and it was only over shoes, but I'm telling you, it's the most simple and subtle things that actually lead to some of the biggest trauma.
Right. And conversely, the simple and subtle things that we can do once we learn and we do the inner work that can teach the most potent lessons. I just read something tonight. Someone saw a father comment to a child. It was something to the effect that they're in the library and it's like, Mom said dinner will be ready, so we'll leave at this time to respect her time. And it wasn't we have to, we got to, because I said, because she said. It wasn't any of that. It was, this is how we're being good people. This is how we're being respectful.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
Okay, so the inner work, getting to the root of the problem, understanding what is best for you ultimately. There's a lot of good stuff in here. What would you say would be the next step or two that you would recommend we take to really lean into this direction that you're giving us?
I'd first say is you can do hard things, acknowledging first that you can do hard things and acknowledging and understanding that it's not going to be hard forever. The second thing that I would say to yourself is remind yourself, whatever you are not changing, you are choosing. And no choice is still a choice. Once you get through those two things, I would then say, where in your world, home life, community, or business is keeping you the most awake? And choose one of those areas to then dive deeper into. So if it's home life, if your home life now is crazy and chaos and your marriage is breaking down potentially, or your relationships with your kids are breaking down, or even your relationship with yourself, it's almost always said to clients, whenever you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing on your mind? And when things start to get bad, like I know with my ex-husband, when things started to get bad, every day I'd wake up going, God, I hope today's a better day. And I remember to saying, if whatever you're waking up to is bringing you more pain than joy, then it's time to let it go, right? Now, I'm not asking you all to go get divorced, for goodness sakes. But what I'm asking you is to really look at those three areas of life, business or career, home life, or your community, and choose one of those assets of what's going on. And then I would say, if you're comfortable, that's where I'd say is go and choose one of those modalities I talked about. Either go and speak with a counselor. Do you know what I mean? If that's what feels right for you, go and do hypnotherapy if that feels right for you. I also work with like a healer who does like Akashic record readings. So I mean, choose what feels right for you because you're going to have better success.
Okay. I love that. Yeah. The what keeps you up at night is a great way to choose the first thing, because it's really ultimately what it's about. Now, before we dig into our rapid wrap up, I would love for you to tell us where we can find you online, and how about that new rebranded podcast of yours? What's going on?
Yeah. I mean, again, I always say, each of you listening will have a different way of wanting to connect. I always say head to my website, which is angelahenderson.com.au. And from there, you can check out the podcast or how to work with me, etc. But if you want to go straight to the podcast, it's on all major platforms, which is just the online business show, the Angela Henderson online business show. And if you're on Instagram, I'm over at Angela Henderson Consulting. So you can pick and choose, how you want to connect. But yes, reach out and say hi.
Sounds good. I will have those links in the show notes. All right. You ready for the rapid wrap up?
I'm ready. Yep.
All right, Ange. How about a song that lifts my spirits and makes me dance?
There's a song in America called Fancy Like. And so, yes, it's like Fancy Like with like Ruby Tuesdays or something like that. Yes, it always makes me smile because in Australia, they don't have a lot of like music like that. So I always giggle because it takes me back that they talk about some of my love of my American restaurants. So yes, Fancy Like.
Yeah, 2 straws, 1 shake. I got you. Girl.
Yes, I do like, love it.
Okay, how about a quote or a mantra that inspires me that I share?
Yeah, I go back to the one that I said earlier is whatever you are not changing, you are choosing. I live by that every single day. What am I not changing? I'm choosing this. So yes, I do it all the time.
Good. Okay. How about a resource? It could be a book, an app, anything really that's made my life better.
Yeah, a good resource is one of my favorite books is The Go-Giver by Bob Burg and John David Mann. I pick that book up anywhere from like 10 times a year just to have a look. And it really goes back to the primary principles about leading with love first and you'll become profitable.
I love that. Leading with love with ourselves, right? That's so important. Okay. And last, but certainly not least, what are you grateful for today?
So funny. I was journaling this morning and I always go, what would make today great? And then I always do my 3 places of gratitude. So today I'm grateful for sunshine. Today I'm grateful for movement. And today I'm grateful for my new boyfriend and the love that he continues to share as we, go through this new journey together.
Beautiful list. And well, I am certainly grateful for you, Ange, to be connected as we have been and for you shining your light so brightly in this world and for sharing it with us today. Thank you.
Gosh, thank you so much for having me, my friend. It's always a pleasure to be in your energy and around you. So thank you for bringing me on.
Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious and limited, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback, questions, or want to schedule a chat, head to positivelyproductive.com/connect. And if you are looking for any of the resources referenced on the podcast, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.